investigation has found high levels of lead in 2/3 of protein powders and shakes tested. It is the talker of talkers, a shocker that has so many people looking at what we consume on a daily basis, or at least a regular basis, these supplements, wondering about the safety of what we are consuming. So I have so been looking forward to this conversation with Dr. Laurel Cherian, the Associate Professor of the Department of Neurological Sciences at Rush University Medical Center. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Oh, how much time did you carve out?
I've got some time. What are your questions?
So this is still our top talker online. This is what everyone is clicking on our website, fox32chicago.com. So they analyzed 23 protein powders and shakes. I'll start by asking you, is that even enough of a sampling for the stir that it has caused?
Yeah, you're right. It really has garnered a robust reaction on social media and just all over the internet. And I think part of the reason for that is that these protein powders have really become not just for bodybuilders or kind of a niche market, but they've really become popular broadly as a wellness supplement or things that a lot of people are taking and sometimes taking on a daily or multi times a day basis.
Yeah, I drink a protein shake every morning. I literally have the shake bottle, and I also have the protein powders in my place. So when I saw this, I pop up and I'm like, let me see, is mine on there? Is mine on there? The brands, or that particular one. What is your reaction to the information that was released? What initially went through your mind?
Well, it's anytime you find out that there's lead in a product that you're consuming, I think it's concerning because we know that lead is harmful. There's really no safe amount of lead. But it also really highlights the fact that the FDA does not regulate supplements. They really rely on these manufacturers to regulate themselves. Some of them do hire third-party companies to try to monitor the quality of their products, but it's not like a medication or other things that we use for our health. And so I think part of the reason it caused such a shockwave is that people were buying these products thinking that they were safe and healthy, and now there's some concern about that.
Yeah, and that leads to one of the other questions I had for you. Why doesn't the FDA regulate supplements more strenuously at this point in time? Because I do feel like maybe there have been some other supplements that have come up too with some issues. Since so many people are using them, why isn't it regulated more strenuously?
I think that is a really good question, and some of it is just the way that it's classified as a substance as opposed to a medication. And it may be something that is worth looking at, but for whatever reason, as it stands right now, they are treated differently than other medications that are regulated by the FDA.
And since they're not as heavily regulated, does this study then change anything?
It'll be interesting to see just because of how much of a reaction it's gotten. I do want to just kind of as a caveat, because it has garnered so much attention online, just sort of reassure people that even though these levels they're reporting are higher than they use the standards that California uses are high, taking this or even taking daily or several times a week doses, it's not really a risk of acute lead poisoning or something like that. We're really talking about lower quantities accumulating over time. So, I don't want to have people panic about it, but at the same time, I do think it warrants maybe a little bit of examination of how much of these supplements people are taking, how frequently, and maybe looking at that list and looking at some of the companies that maybe do have the higher levels.
Yeah, maybe a little public pressure would at the very least force the companies to change some things. More than 2/3 of the products contained more lead in a single serving than what its experts say is safe to consume in a day, some by more than 10 times. What are the implications of something like that if you're a regular consumer?
So the main risks of lead consumption are things like high blood pressure. That's actually one of the American Heart Association's biggest cardiovascular risk factors for stroke, but also heart attacks. And essentially lead, as it accumulates over time, can be stored in our bones and it can leach back into the body. And so when there is accumulation of lead over time, the risk of developing high blood pressure goes up. Also, things like cognition. There have been some studies on aging and cognitive dysfunction over time, joint pain, infertility. There's just a lot of negative health effects associated with lead. And so obviously we want to be cautious about that. Now, it's almost impossible to avoid entirely because it is in our soil, it's in our water, and so it does get into vegetables and our food chain. So it's hard to eliminate entirly. And I did notice from this study that the vegan brands seem to have higher levels, and that may be because of how they're compounded. And so keeping an eye on that. So it's impossible to avoid lead entirely, but really when you're noticing that there are sources where you're getting more than recommended or higher levels, I think it is something to be cautious about.
Yeah, it gives you pause for sure. You mentioned the fact that it is in our water, our soil. How is this different from the lead controversies for water that we have seen? I mean, those were major. How is this different from what we were reporting there?
Well, I think one major difference is that, if you live in the city and you turn on your tap and the water comes out, you don't really have a choice. And that really is I think a much broader public health implication. Whereas this is a product that people are purchasing and they're choosing to consume and how much of, as opposed to something like water, or back in the 70s when they used to have lead in the gasoline and it was, it affected air quality and other things like that. So sort of a pervasive public health concern versus something that's maybe limited to a smaller subset of individuals.
And in the report, it said that it had gotten worse since over the last 15 years when they did another major study. Is this inadvertently that it got worse, or what do you think some manufacturers could be doing that maybe adds lead, that they're trying to do something else with it?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And the short answer is I'm not sure. They don't routinely publish these studies. So I think this was done. And like you said, they're comparing it to a study that they had done maybe 10 years ago. I think the popularity of these supplements has gone up a lot over time. So there's just a lot more of them on the market. I think there are more manufacturers than there used to be. And there may be variability in the supply chain and the processes for that. And that may be part of what's driving it, is just the increasing number of manufacturers in the market.
Yeah, there's a plethora of them at this point in time. So what should people be doing instead? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and really the convenience of these, and the reason I think they are so popular is that it's sort of an easy way to up the protein content, in your daily diet. But really, the best source of nutrition is whole foods, and there are a lot of other ways, great ways to get protein into your diet, like eating chicken, beans, yogurt, fish, nuts. And trying to really amp up those more natural whole food sources of protein, I think, is one response to this. And the other thing is using them in the frequency. If this is something that is part of your diet, maybe 2-3 times a day, every meal, versus something that you maybe use after a big strength training workout, or for some of my elderly patients that maybe have trouble getting enough protein in, supplementing a little bit with a protein shake. So I think the quantity matters and the source matters. And by and large, if I had the choice between eating whole natural food and getting the nutrients that route versus some sort of processed product that you're trying to sort of condense that and get it all in one shot, you're probably better 9 times out of 10 eating the actual whole food that you're preparing yourself.
Yeah, what are some other things that we should, lead obviously is the topic of the day, but what are some other things that we should be maybe conscious of or thinking of when if we're going to purchase these products?
Well, one of the things that we mentioned earlier is that they are not regulated by the FDA, although the FDA does have sort of a blanket recommendation that there not be harmful substances or toxic substances in the products. And then they leave the onus of that and really the trust that the consumer places with the company itself. And so there are some companies that have third-party examination of their products and get that vetted. I think NSF is one of the companies, and there's several others. So some of them, potentially looking for somebody that actually does have their supplement tested, maybe one. And the other, I've been reading some of the responses to this Consumer Reports article, and some of the companies that had the higher levels, are saying that they're looking at their own supply chains and they're retesting, et cetera. But certainly reading the labels, as always, and seeing, do they test, do they vet their product, I think is one step. And then, like I said earlier, really avoiding an over reliance on supplements, and really still, I think, valuing just kind of a good quality diet at baseline.
Yeah,
and not using this in lieu of that.
Can you talk about, and it's one thing my doctor has even brought up, the fact that, in an effort to be quote unquote healthy, some of the things that even seem healthy, if we use them too much, can have the opposite effect.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think that's the other, the appeal, I think, of a lot of supplements is that they're readily available. There's something really empowering about being able to go out as a consumer and just pick these up at the store, and you don't need a prescription. One, I'm a neurologist. One that we see sometimes is people will take zinc. It's in everything for cold medicines, and we're getting into cold and flu season, and they'll take it, and it actually blocks the absorption of copper, which we need for our nerve health. So people will develop a neuropathy, like a copper deficiency neuropathy, because they're really loading up on all this, zinc supplements and things like that. So you have to be careful with supplements, because the doses that they're giving oftentimes are hundreds or thousands of times the recommended daily value. And sometimes when you're really taking a lot of one nutrient, you sometimes inadvertently block the absorption or interfere with the absorption of another. So really, it's just good to be cautious. It's good to tell your doctor, when you're going to your doctor, they should be asking you, what medicines are you on, how much. But if you're taking a lot of supplements and you're into this stuff, I think keeping a list and knowing exactly what you're taking and how much, I think that can be good to communicate with your doctor too, to make sure that they really understand everything that you're putting in your body, because some of that can have side effects or interactions with either other supplements or other medications.